Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Drew Redden, and I'm the President and CEO of the Oakville Chamber of Commerce. And welcome to our session today, Your Influence Never Sleeps with Neil Thornton, President of the Thornton Group of Companies. Today's event is proudly presented by the 4 Halton Region Chambers of Commerce, a group that we always appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with. Now, I've had the pleasure of sitting in on several of Neil's sessions over the years, and I am sure he will be just as engaging virtually as he is in person. We also are really looking forward to the networking sessions that will conclude our event today, and we so appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. I also want to acknowledge and thank our community partner, Cogeco, as they will be recording and re-airing Neil's presentation. Cogeco is not only an incredible partner of our chambers here in Halton, but of the chamber network across the province. So thank you to Cogeco. I'd now like to turn the screen over to my friend and colleague, Scott McCammon, President and CEO of the Milton Chamber of Commerce, to introduce our guest speaker.
That's great. Thanks, Drew. Well, Neil Thornton, for those that have already seen him in action, you know that you're in store for an amazing session tonight. And for those that have not experienced Neil yet, hold on to your seats because it's going to be high energy, fun, and an insightful presentation. Neil's made a commitment over the years to share his ideas, insights, and trends as he's done consulting, business development. He's been an entrepreneur, and he's been talking with business leaders. And Neil has this uncanny ability to read people and to work a room. And we know that's going to be more challenging today on Zoom, but trust me when I tell you, Neil's going to make it work. In fact, Neil's presentation today, as Drew said, is about how your influence never sleeps. And that's especially relevant these days as we've all been reinventing ourselves and as we look for new ways to do business in the pandemic. So help me welcome to the stage, Mr. Neil Thornton.
There's like applause going. Okay, so everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me okay? I got some new equipment here. I got my Yeti mic all set up and my lights, and there's some great faces here. My buddy Frank Papillo's here from St. Catharines, and there's Oliver Gleason, my buddy. Oliver's here. Crystal Henderson's here from Huntsville. There's no pressure. Crystal Henderson, can you send me some more of that Black Bear coffee? That stuff is what killed Elvis, man. It's so good. So today is for you guys. So I'm so honored to be number one of the Chamber Network. You guys know that I'm a big fan of what the chambers actually do. I'm in Niagara, so as of April, I'm now the ending of my board term with the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. And we always, as my board chair term went on, I always made it a very cognizant effort to connect with the other chambers of what we're doing that's very unique and new. Because I guess that stand is no different than what today is for you guys. I'm about to give you a drink of water with a fire hose. So you're gonna need a seatbelt and a parachute, but I wanna give you some tools. I wanna give you some things that could probably help many of you right now. Since March, I've been in full writing, impact and influence. And then part of that book was Your Influence Never Sleeps. And I'll tell you why now, before I go any further, I'm going to probably drop a lot of authors to you during the talk. And by all means, any of you could reach out after this and I'll send my recommended reading list. It's just something that I revisited as soon as March hit. So here we are back in March 2000. And like many of you, I'm just kind of wandering around the house. I didn't really know what to do with myself for a couple of weeks. I'm used to being all over the place. And I'm on the shores of Lake Erie. So I was building my wall made out of stale Timbits, but I won't need that anymore. But now what I'm doing is it got around April. And I remember saying to myself, this isn't going to come to an end. And I think there is no norm moving forward. And I'm sure we will probably all agree with that. What we once knew as the norm is going to be different. And so change right now is constant. And I remember a number of years ago, I read Tom Peters' book called Reimagine. And there was a quote in there that really impacted me. And it said, if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevancy even less. And I realized that myself, like my colleague Oliver on this call, is we're consultants and we're usually out there meeting with people and we're meeting with teams. And now all of a sudden I'm in the office and I'm thinking to myself, well, what do I now do? Like, what can I do to stay relevant? What can I do to reinvent? And then what I did was I went back to the lessons that a number of us learned back in 2008. And you see, this isn't new what's happening here today. This is not new. We all watched what Walmart did to Sears. And then now we watched what Amazon has done to Walmart. We were kind of giggling in the waiting room we signed up. I ordered an iPad a day and a half ago in my pajamas. I don't want you to know what that looked like, but I'm in my pajamas and a day and a half, I have brand new technology. So what happens now is Amazon has reinvented Walmart. What Uber did to the taxi industry, what Netflix, all of us are addicted to Netflix, did to the Blockbuster. So I go back to 2008 and here was my rule for 2008 and today. What is pandemic proof? At that time, what is recession proof? So I'm thinking. And the one thing I realized very quickly was time. And time keeps going. Time is not stopping right now. So part of time, if you're in business and you're on this call, so you're in business, it's your brand. And as I'm thinking, the brand, the new book, presence, impact, and influence, I realize that your influence and your brand never sleeps. And I'm thinking to myself, this is now what I need to do. But the technology has changed. The deliverables have changed. One of the first calls I got in April was from Canada's largest financial institution. And they said, Neil, how do we run virtual meetings that don't suck? How do we engage our teams when half of them are staring on their phones or they're eating their breakfast or heaven forbid, they take their computer in the bathroom? You don't want to know what happens there. But so now what's happening is we now have to engage people without being in the room. So I thought back to all the training that I've ever received. And many of you know I'm a big fan of Dale Carnegie. Back in 1912, he started writing the principles from How to Influence People. And I went back to that and I thought, well, everything that I know that I've always taught people, I've always coached you being memorable. I coach body language. I coach strategic doing, because we all know the planning is easy. The doing is the hard part. Now I have to do that over a screen. So I thought to myself, how much more energy am I now going to have to translate to engage a group of people on a screen? And I can tell you as a leader, things like using your hands, things like taking your voice and moving in and out. And every once in a while, let some silence come into what you're doing. So what I figured was all that I've ever learned to teach in person, I can now translate that to an online world. So I'm thinking to myself, what is change good? And I thought to myself, no, it's hard for many people. And I know there are probably people on this call right now who have been very impacted by the pandemic and its effects. If you're a B2C company or you're front facing anyway, some of those challenges have really impacted you more than ever before. And I started a bit of an interview series on LinkedIn with some business owners that are reinventing. And my first interview was with Stephanie Solis. She owns Little Mushroom Catering up in Kitchener-Waterloo. And I'm thinking to myself, if someone's been impacted by the pandemic, it's a catering business. And she opened a small restaurant early last year. And I got her on the phone. And the reason that I got her on the phone or on a video call was because she did something different. And I think what's happening right now is we've got to see change the good things. So what she did was we were doing a talk for about 200 business owners in Kitchener-Waterloo, and everybody's talking about the breakfast. And we're all on our screens like we are too. It's like, hey, did you have that breakfast? It was the best coffee. Man, those scones were awesome. And I'm like, well, what do you mean about breakfast? What Stephanie decided to do was deliver the breakfast the night before. Scones, frittatas, fresh coffee. And then for every meal that was purchased, she donated a meal back to a frontline worker at the hospital. And I thought, well, there's somebody who's reinventing. So the first thing we need to do is increase our relationship to change. Show of hands, how many people resist change? How many people do you think resist change? Right? It's like a hand there. People, oh yeah, that's a natural cause that most of us think is, yeah, I resist change. It's actually not true. In fact, what is true is people will resist the uncertainty of change that's perceived forced on them. So naturally, a lot of people think right now the economic conditions are forced on me, and for all intents purposes, they are. But remember the famous quote, it's not what happens to us that matters, it's how we react to it. So what I'm thinking about is, okay, so if we got to have a better relationship to change, and right now I'm thinking about how do I get my business to survive? What do I do with my expenses, my fixed expenses, my variable expenses? And I'm thinking as a business owner. And then I remember a book that I read. It was this one. And I've used this quite a bit lately. Here, I'll show everybody. So this book was written by Simon Sinek. And we all know Simon Sinek. He wrote a great book called Start With Why. And I often tell companies, if they're driving change, you always have to start with the why first. Because if you don't, then the best meetings happen in the hallways after the meetings where people don't have any relationship to change. So I was always a fan of Simon Sinek. And then I picked up this book, and it's called The Infinite Game. And this is probably the one book that I go to the most right now, because it's all about perspective in your business. You see, many of you know that I coach and I develop visions with organizations. And a vision represents your infinite game. You're not playing the game to win, you're playing the game to make a difference. And that's what great visions are. Now, we've all seen the vague platitude wallpaper visions, like, I'm going to exceed clients' expectations by offering the highest level of service and quality. That's called puke. It's about as useful as it is. It was written by some people, went to Muskoka's, sorry, Crystal, and they got all liquored up, and they came back and said, here's our vision. And people in the organization go, I don't care. What? What's for lunch? Right? So people will contribute to something they help create. If you're managing a team right now, I really want you to think about what I said. People will contribute to something they help create. So a vision isn't a strategic checkoff on a strategic plan. A vision is what compels us to be bigger than we are today. And a vision is bigger than the pandemic. The pandemic will not define us. Are we changing exponentially? Yes, we are. Everybody will agree with that. Change right now is exponential. My fear is many of us are only learning incrementally at a time of exponential change. Try this with your team. Show of hands, is our business changing? Absolutely. Show of hands, is our market changing? Yeah. How about our competitors? How about our customers? So our expectations are changing. Well, how about us? How about us and our team? So if we have a team that resists change, then your role as a leader is to now lead and influence that change. You see, as a leader, you have three skill sets. You have management skills, you have leadership skills, and you have coaching skills. And all three are completely different disciplines and three completely different acumens. See, a manager manages things and produces predictable results. And there's great managers. There's a bunch of managers on this call today, and you're really good at what you do. And then you, as a manager, you want to move into leadership. And leadership is your ability to inspire and motivate change. But where you start with leadership is what you're known as when you're not in the room. And that's a great definition of leadership, is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And then coaching skills are your ability to take someone's performance to a whole different level by never giving them the answer. It's always by asking great questions. So as we move into this infinite game, what we want to do is create vision that's bigger than the last 8 or 9 months. But many companies right now, and I'm sure a number of you on the phone, and my buddy Oliver will agree, is many companies right now are making finite decisions, finite changes, short-term changes based on the influence that's impacted on them. And I will tell you, there's no sustainability in that model. There's no sustainability right now to be making reactionary decisions. So let's think about your vision for your organization. You might say, well, what is our vision? Like, what are we going towards? If you've ever read the book Built to Last by Jim Collins, who also wrote Good to Great, he always said part of a vision should be a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And that's what a lot of companies want right now is, what is our BHAG? What's our great vision? Now, remember the rules of designing a vision. It's in the paper that we sent you. The rules of designing a vision is it has to be a very clear picture. Everyone can see what we're trying to do. An automobile in every home when there were only 20 Model Ts that had been produced. And Henry Ford said, every home's going to own an automobile. How about I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King? How about by the end of the 1960s, we'll do the moon shot. We're going to put a man on the moon and bring him back alive. That was called the moon shot. Why was that? Why did that move an entire nation? It was to beat the Russians at the time. Well, let's get a little bit more modern. Someone said all of human knowledge can be found on a handheld device. Steve Jobs. And you know Steve Jobs said 14,000 songs in your pocket at the time when most people were just making a better Walkman. And Steve Jobs envisioned that. How about probably the vision that's created what we're doing today is Bill Gates in the late 1960s said every computer will be in a home. Every home will own a computer. When the average size of a microprocessor was probably as big as Drew Redden's office. The thing was huge, huge, right? And you're thinking every home's going to own one of those. But his very engineers at IBM told Bill Gates this: there's no reason for a computer to be in a home. In fact, every leader that I just talked about was met with incredible social resistance. And some of the greatest visions have been accomplished with some of the greatest resistance in the world. So today what we think about is our infinite game is how many of you are now planning 2022, 2023, maybe not 2025. It's a little far away. We know everything's going to change. But right now, a lot of companies are saying, hey, Neil, I just need to create a great vision for 2021. And then I want to put our team into the summer and the fall and the winter when we're going to be used to what's happening, what we move forward. But to do that, we have to drive change. And driving change will probably be one of the hardest things anyone on this call today is going to do. How do I lead and drive change? John Cotter wrote a great book called Leading Change. And I always love looking at probably the four main things that all of you will need to do to lead change. And if any one of these is missing, you have about as much hope as your company will be as useless as an ashtray on a motorcycle. So to drive change, you need vision like we talked about. And I mean a clear vision that inspires everyone in your organization to improve, to become a learning organization. Remember, if you haven't heard that term learning organization, I want you to think about what you're going to do in your organization as the baby boomers retire. We all know that's happening right now. And we have the Gen Xers and we have the millennials and the Gen Zs now working together. And if you thought those millennials had attention spans of squirrels on crack, wait till you meet these new Gen Zs. They're the iPad generation. Everything for them is wired. So you're thinking, how do I now lead change through these different generations? And so the vision will be important that it translates power to everybody on your team. The second thing you need is what I just said, a team. This call today can drive change alone. No one. If you're a sole entrepreneur, you still have to drive change. You have to drive change with your customers. You have to create maybe what's called a mastermind from a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. This was written in the 1930s. What a great book. There's a concept in here called the mastermind, where you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. You see, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I'm sure we'll all agree with that. So vision, a team, you need a team. Number three, you need a sense of urgency. So vision now is not just something you do part-time. Crystal Henderson and her team up in Huntsville, they created a great vision, but then everybody made a commitment and an action step to work towards the accomplishment of that vision. And we created benchmarks and things that we could actually do to measure what we're going to do. And it's fun up in Huntsville because they're always partying up there. They're cool people. And the fourth thing you need is exactly what Crystal Henderson did with her team, is everyone on her team knew the economic reality and what is at risk if nothing is to change. Ask your team now, what is at risk for us if we don't change? Now, change is hard, right? Most of us have heard the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Well, I like Einstein's quote, is you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. And I think that's true right now in your business. I'm not going to grow my business with the same mindset I had in 2020. I need to admit that I don't know what I don't know. I need to admit that ego and awareness cannot coexist. For anyone who's read anything by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now and the New Earth, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Ego and awareness cannot coexist. There is no more room for ego in any business. If you think you already know, you don't know. I write a lot about listening. I've been in corporate communications for 20 years. I'm a linguistic. I study body language. I study patterns and language. The biggest thing most of us need to work on right now is our listening. Because what happens is, as human beings, we tend to hear something and we relate it to what we already know. You hear things like, that's just like, or we tried that before. That's really great, Scott, but, and then people start to judge and they make these comparisons and contrasting. So when somebody's speaking, you're just listening to be right. You're listening to justify your thinking. How about moving forward, we change possible instead of probable? Now, to do that, you're going to have to listen differently. You're going to have to listen from nothing. This is really hard. What I'm asking all of you to do right now is listen from not having to know. Actually, it's very freeing. When you resign your position as general manager of the universe, you don't have to always be right. You might actually hear things you've never heard before. And I think that's now the basis of reinvention, is admitting I don't know what I don't know, admitting that I'm willing to get some help. I'm willing to, maybe like what great athletes do, they use great coaches. Maybe I want to take my business to the next level. Maybe this pandemic's a good thing. Maybe it's forced me into creating what I've never created before. See, back in 2008, I was running around with this book. This is probably the most famous book in the world. This is called How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is an original version from 1935. This is worth a couple of bucks, right? And I'm thinking, well, if I can get human again and go back to the fundamentals, but in 2008, I was managing one of the largest training companies in the world. And then all of a sudden, our training budgets are gone. Sorry, we're not going to do any training with our staff. And I could run around and say, hey, if you're not training your staff, it's costing you more than if you train them. But they weren't listening. And I think a lot of times right now with this pandemic, is a lot of people are kind of in worry. I don't know if any of you are with that. I know right now, and let's be considerate of everybody on the line, the mental stress this has taken on people. And Carnegie also wrote a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Henry Cloud wrote a great book called The One Life Solution. I read this book on a flight to Edmonton. I absorbed it because this book is all about resetting your boundaries. And I think this is a great trait for a lot of you right now, is now is a good time to reset your boundaries, what you're willing and unwilling to participate in. I'm unwilling and I'm not willing to participate in stress. I've made that decision. I'm removing stress and worry from my life. And I get these people, there's people around like, yeah, Neil, there's no way you can do that. Sure, I can. It's all about perspective. So when the pandemic hit and people are like, yeah, I'm really worried and stressed and I've got a lot going on. And this next book is very emotionally, this book is emotionally hard for me to share. I can't even say it, for crying out loud. But when I'm stressed and worried, I picked up this. Here, I'll show you what it is. Some of you might recognize that. When I say the word Viktor Frankl is the author, some people might go, oh, I might have heard about that. How about the title of this book? It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And this book was written in 1945. So you can probably tell right now what this book is about. And Viktor Frankl was liberated from Auschwitz. And he was forced to watch his family perish. And as he sat naked on a freezing cold stainless steel table, and he was a psychologist, so he did inhumane experiments on him, he made a decision that the only thing they couldn't take from him was decision. And when he was actually liberated, he wrote this book and a psychology called logotherapy, which is the psychology of choice. So I'm finding this is more and more people coming back to this saying, now, I want to make a different choice. And you have the ability to do that. You have the ability to continue working on your brand right now. LinkedIn is an incredible tool. I do a lot of recruitment right now, and a lot of people are looking for new opportunities. Heck, guys, I'm in Niagara region. You can still buy a house out here for $350,000. I probably shouldn't say that very loud, but $350,000. That's the price of Scott McCammon's garage, right? So you're thinking right now, I'm in the GTA. My life is crazy. I want a new choice. I want new choices. And I think that's where a lot of people are right now, is they're getting a new grip on resetting some boundaries. They want to now focus on, what can I do to improve? So your brand never stops. And there's some great branding people on this call right now that can say, what is it that you want to be known as in your market? Do you want to be known as an innovator? Do you want to be known as a speaker or as a product expert? I love going into companies and looking at their website and saying, hey, you guys do great stuff. They go, yeah, we do. But who knows about it? And there's all kinds of avenues now where you can actually create some momentum in just content, creating some great content and sharing some great news. If any of you are in marketing, we all know right now the big marketing trend is telling great stories. And I teach marketing at Niagara College, and every year I've got great students that see the power of just sharing great stories. And now what you can do on your website is tell great stories, but your website has to pass the Go Train test. Tap, 3 swipes. Any more than that, I'm gone, right? This is our new marketplace. So now what we're saying is, how do we get our story across quicker, faster? How do I stand out in a very crowded marketplace? What are some things I can do? And what are some things that I want to be known as? Well, it might even start with your language. You see, everything you are in your language starts the moment you all wake up. That's the way it happens. The Buddha, pretty famous author, said, with our thoughts, we make the world. Yet when I talk to a lot of people right now, when they wake up, they see lack. They see what they don't have. So their entire day is programmed to make something go away or to make something better. But that thing that they're trying to make go away keeps showing up for them, because that's what they're putting out. Their worldview is to lose weight. Their worldview is, I'll be famous if only. And then I hear words in companies like the word they. Please, everybody, write the word they down. If any of you ever hear that word in your company, you call me. I'm coming there with a bat, because you have a problem. You have a cultural issue. The word they, believe it or not, will kill most companies. You see, your culture will eat your strategic plan for breakfast. And if people don't trust one another and you hear the word they and the blame shows up, it starts from the moment we wake up. So believe it or not, I've been having a great time resetting affirmations with people. It's what you see and what you say to yourself the moment you wake up. So even though the pandemic's affecting us, we can still wake up and say, this is what I want to bring into existence. This is what I really want to create. It's funny, if I held up, I'm going to see if I've got one here. I think I do. So let's say I hold up an elastic. Some of you guys have seen me do this, called structural tension. So here's an elastic, and this elastic has tension. And naturally, tension seeks resolution. So every time I stretch this elastic, you would think it would go back to its original shape. It tries, but it physically doesn't. Every time I stretch this elastic, it doesn't go back to its original shape. So who's stretching you? Like, who's stretching? Somebody's like, I'm stretched a little bit. How? I'm stretched. You see, this hand is your vision. This is where we're going. This hand is your current reality. So when you set a vision that's not very strong, or it's obscure, or it's not a picture, it just collapses. And you run around with your current reality. As soon as you leave the call today, you go to see how many emails you received. You get drawn right back into being a human doing. You see, when you have a team that's focused on vision and where we're going, and the vision shows up in every conversation you have, the current reality gets pulled to the vision, right? That's why I set visions that are BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, because the greatest visions were spoken at a time that were considered impossible. So when you're at work, well, when we ever come back together again, or you're on these virtual calls, listen, what do you hear? Do you hear conversations about where we're going here? Or do you hear conversations about where we are, the current reality? So the current reality will kill your organization. So focus on your language, focus on what you hear in organizations. How about focus right now on the biggest thing I'm coaching is body language, the nonverbals. Why are nonverbals important? Even right now in a virtual world. Look, there's Kristen kind of looking around. She's checking her emails. There's Becky. She suddenly looked up. There's Drew Redden. He hasn't moved since we started. He's like this. He's freaking out. Crystal's got a big smile. Look at Genevieve. Look at the thinker. Look at the thinker going, right? There's France. Look at France. So I'm telling you right now, nonverbal communications is 85% of all communications. And it translates virtually. The most honest part of the human body is the eyes. So when you're speaking to your team, do you see eyes or do you see foreheads? Your language, are you using powerful language? Are you speaking in 3D? Are you larger than life? Because virtually, you gotta put it out there. You gotta get it out there for your team to hear. But if you're just speaking in your monotone and maybe 1D and you're sitting at your desk, you're like, okay, everybody, let's go through the numbers. Your team would rather go to a tax seminar. Oh, is there any accountants on the call today? I'm sorry, guys. Right? Your team would rather go to a tax seminar than listen to you drone on in another virtual call. So there's things that you can do with your hands. There's things that you can do with your body language, the way you hold your shoulders, the way you hold your chin. Your chin should always be level. If your chin goes up, it's a sign of arrogance. You're exposing kill points. Are your eyes open? Do you see shining eyes? Do you see people's hands? Do you see heads nodding? Because a head nod is an understanding of where you are. And if I tilt my head, really, and my head to the left is really, it's actually a criticism and curiosity, just in a head tilt. So believe it or not, there's a lot of things people are doing right now to say, I want to be stronger. I want to increase my impact. I want to increase my influence. So what I did was I went ahead and I wrote this report and I just thought, what do people want right now? And it's funny that companies are now coming out of this and they're saying, number one, it's not going away. There is no normal. And as human beings, we tend to have this path of least resistance. We tend to not want to change, but change is constant. It's been constant for the last 100 years in business. So if change is constant, now what we have to do is step back and say, as a leader, how am I driving and influencing the change that we all need to make? And the vision is where you start. I could say to all of you, hey, everybody come to Ridgeway for dinner tonight. My wife's out there going, what? Right? Everybody come to Ridgeway. We'll see you at 7 o'clock. And like, well, hang on, I don't know where you live in Ridgeway. I don't have a map. And so for most organizations now, we want to create a very clear map of where we're going. Strategically, you should be executing no more than 5 things ever in your strategic plan. Get rid of these 30-page strategic plans. They're consultants' dreams. Sorry, guys, consultants, right? 30-page strategic plans are consultants' dreams. They're giant fees. All of you should have 1-page strategic plans. 1 page, vision, mission, core values of how we're going to communicate with one another, and then our 3 to 5 key performance indicators, including benchmarks, tactics, and champions. If you want to know how to do that, it's called the Rockefeller Habits. I highly recommend that book. And then when it comes to core values, if you're going to decide to get human again back in your business, ask your team this one question. Here it is. As it relates to working on this team, what is important to you? What do you value the most? And be sincere when you ask for it, and be prepared to share your vision in that moment. And be prepared to share what you're passionate about. And then you ask your entire team what's important to them and what are they most passionate about, and you get their answers, and then those make up your core values. And then like getting those is easy. Doing a vision is easy. It's how do you measure it? So if you're in a team, here's a great exercise. Hey team, do we all agree on our vision and our mission and our core values? And everybody nods. Okay, great. We're going to meet again virtually or in our boardroom next week. You guys ready? We're going to meet next week. Okay. For next week, would you all be prepared to stand in front of our team and give us a specific example, including a date and a time of when you've lived our vision and values. Have a great week. Watch how people walk out of the room. What? You see, it's the space between the meetings where people are going to learn. It's the space between the bars that keeps the lion in the cage. It's the space between the notes that makes the music. It's the space between the meetings where people are going to be looking for real life examples of how they've lived the organizational vision and values. You take those examples when they report back and you call out the bullcrap ones. Sorry, I grew up in Hamilton, so I use a swear word, right? So you pass out, you get rid of the bullcrap ones, the ones that people pull out of somewhere on their way into the meeting, but most people will take this serious, and then you publish them and you let them and your customers and your market know that we're serious about growing our business because everyone contributes. That's our choice now. And it goes back to you. If you walk and talk and speak the same way you always do, your team's not hearing a word you say. They're automatically listening to you. Try to show up differently. Be more powerful. If you sit down for a meeting, stand up. If you normally stand up, sit down, pull your team together. Let your team share the facilitations. I think that right now is our only choice. So I'll end with this one question for you guys. What is it that you want to be known as? You. What do you want to be known as? And I'll tell you, the answer to that is harder than you think. So we got Halton Hills here. Halton Hills, rock. You guys, Georgetown, most beautiful town in the world. I better not say that because the Niagara Lake people get all weird. We got Milton here. We got Oakville. We got those crazies from Burlington. We're here from Niagara. I know Keenan from Hamilton would be all over this. I say we come together as a team and we shift the universe. We use my favorite quote. Are you ready for this? This is my favorite quote. I want to get this tattooed somewhere, but I need a lot of real estate. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers. They're not fond of rules. You can quote them, disagree, or vilify them, but the one thing you can't do is ignore them because they change things and they push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius because the ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. As from Steve Jobs. So I love you guys.